All right, let's see. And we're on. Hello, YouTube and YouTube lovers. This is Bub's Comics, and we are coming at you live with the No Faces Comic Chat. With me, as always, I have Roger Metarog. Say greetings, everyone.
Greetings, everyone.
Yes. And with me, as always, I have DS Comics. Say hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
And tonight we are the super soldier serum sippers. How you like that?
I like it.
Do you really?
I like it.
Love
We're
it.
back to full alliteration.
Love
it's
it.
Just a really cool title. I'm down.
Yeah, love
Awesome.
it. Love it.
Well, you can't chug that super serum because you'll get like gas. You know, it hurts. You got to be careful with it. You got to sip it. And already in the chat, huh?
I'll remember that from now on.
Yeah, remember that.
Always
Yes,
better
please.
to inject it. Actually, I would never sip it. I would just mainline it.
Well, I chug
Mainline
it.
it.
Yeah.
Actually, I think they make a suppository now. So we have TMC Comics.
No comment. Too much information. TMI.
No, not TMI. TMC. TMC Comics is in the house, and I'm glad he's here because he is actually the person that inspired this chat topic for this evening, which we'll get to in just a moment. So thank you for being here. And with us, as usual, we have, of course, DS Comics in the chat, Metarog's in the chat. We have JPL Flash, always here early because he's hoping we'll end early so he can go to bed at a reasonable time from across the pond. We have Bigglesworth. Welcome, Bigglesworth. We have the Comic Collector saying hello and what's up, everybody. We got Gray Man. There we go. We're always international in this house tonight. And if you ask Metarog, he would tell you that Werewolf by Lunchtime is in who knows where. I think last time you said he was in New Zealand or something, but I'm pretty sure he's from Perth.
Perth. Yeah.
Perth.
Australia. Yeah.
Australia. Yeah. And we got Area 51 Mike. So that's already 4 countries, not counting America. Is that right? Gray Man is also in UK, right? So we got UK, Canada, and Australia, and the U.S. So we definitely have 4 countries total. And Rayman the Silencer Man is always in his own world. So we got, which is awesome. I wish I could live there because the flea market finds he's got are awful fine.
Oh yeah, he's in New England. Is that another country? New England? No. I'm confusing it with England. I'm sorry. Yeah.
We all used to be there at one point, I think. Right? We're all from up northeast.
Colony. It's colony. Yeah.
Yeah. We have, let's see, we got, that might be it.
Hi, Elia Comic Bro.
Hi, Elia Comic Bro. Hola, mi hermano, ¿qué tal?
That's from another country. Miami-Dade is pretty much another country.
They kicked you out,
trust me. I lived there 45 years. Trust me. It's like nowhere else on earth.
They finally came and got you. We have Bob World in the house. Thank you, with a smiley face. I got a smiley face too. That's good. All right. We about ready, you guys?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Ready to rumble.
The deal tonight, TMC Comics had an interesting comment to one of my videos this past week. Now, for those of you who don't watch my videos, I'm talking to you, DS. We're gonna go we're gonna go ahead and say that basically this was not a typical comment about the actual video. We just, you know how it goes, started kind of a side chat in the comment section. And one thing he mentioned was that he wasn't collecting very many modern books because he can't get, I guess, pulled in by the cover because the cover is always so different than the interior. And I think he was mostly referring to story. So in other words, I think it's kind of a knock on, say, pinup covers or so, but that he's hoping to kind of break from that habit of not buying new comics because of that. And I don't think we're going to be able to break his habit tonight. But in any case, I wanted to talk a little bit about how, comics basically lie to us. And I have 2, I'll start off with 2 examples here. These were 2 comics that really, one I know bothered Roger a lot, and one bothered me a lot. So I'll start with the left one. So when I got back into collecting comics, of course, big Wolverine fan. We got him sitting in a lot of people call it an easy chair or whatever, but actually DS, I think, was the first person to have correctly identified this chair. Do you remember that, DS?
The Barco Lounger?
Yes.
Marco.
And it's also the Morpheus's chair from the Matrix. It actually came from a Morpheus set, which he sits in there quite nicely. And I have this old school Wolverine with the ring that doubles as a mask. So I was a big Wolverine fan as a kid. And so when I got back into collecting, I was like, you know what? I'm going to collect everything Wolverine. This is before I saw Don the Comic Book Junkies videos, and that sobered me from that. But until then, I was like, I'm going to get every appearance of Wolverine. It's going to be awesome. And I also like the Gray Hulk, Joe Fixit, to be exact.
Mm-hmm.
So here is a great battle scene between Joe Fixit, Wolverine in the brown and gold, can't go wrong, and the Thing. Man, I was sold. I tell you, I saw this book and I was like, I got to have that. I think it's a burn cover. I was like, I got to have that. I just got to have it. I bought it. I was so excited. I found it for $1 and I was like, clicking my heels all the way home. And at that time, I was doing a lot of dollar bin diving at the local flea market, if you will, Peddler's Mall. And oftentimes, even though I don't advise this, kids, I am a professional. You shouldn't read comics and drive. But at that time, I had been known to lay a comic out in the driver's seat and kind of flip through it and, shuffle through the comics that I had picked up out of the dollar bin on the way home, which is like a 45-minute drive. So I really had a lot of time to play with them. You shouldn't do that. Please don't do that. But I did at that time that a lot. And so this one I didn't look through because I was so excited. I couldn't wait to get home and give it the proper reading that it was going to deserve. And when I opened it up, the big wah, this whole scene, which isn't even as close to fleshed out. Oh, and don't forget, I think that's Abomination too, holding back the Gray Hulk. So this whole scene is not fleshed out in the comic, and we'll get to a version of that in a minute, but it's all a dream that he has, that the Hulk has while sleeping. And it doesn't even really, like, the whole picture of Wolverine isn't even present. It's like just a shadowy figure of Wolverine in like 2 panels. And the same thing goes for the Thing and for Abomination, as he's having a nightmare about all his former foes. And it lasts all of like 4 panels. It was so, and it's all like in a pink, like grayed out, like you can't even make out what's going on. If you didn't see the cover, you wouldn't even know what this scene was supposed to be. So that was very, very disappointing. And that's just one example of one way that actually that is in the comic, but not even close to the way it's displayed. And you think this is going to be an amazing story with a huge battle scene and the whole thing's going to lead up and this is going to be the final battle, and you get nothing, man. This book just let me down all the way through, and the story itself was terrible. Just bad. So that's one version of that, of how cover can be misleading, and that's not new. This isn't a modern book. I mean, what is it, 89 or so? So, it's a little modern-y, but not like the modern books, where it's just pinup covers, and we'll talk about that too. But Roger has a better story about this one than I did. So, Roger, why don't you tell everybody about the Human Torch?
Yeah. Well, I bought that issue off the 7-Eleven rack way back when, right? 74 or something like that?
It doesn't say on the cover, but yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, way back when. So, hey, Human Torch versus Human Torch. So I'm thinking this is amazing, right? I mean, I'm a big Fantastic Four fan. I'm wondering if that's maybe, a shape-shifting scroll, or perhaps it is the original Human Torch come back into modern days, to try to assert himself. And they how the superheroes love to battle when they reemerge from a period of time, so somewhat like Bub, right? I mean, I get it home. Obviously, I wasn't driving then. I was either riding my bike or my brother took me or whatever. I get it home and I'm like, all right, let's get, and I open the first page and I'm like, what is this? It's a reprint from a Strange Tales and a Golden Age reprint. You know, so it's like what crushed my 8-year-old soul right at that point. The cover is so dynamic, and Bub is right. It doesn't say they're in the same story. It just says they're in the same magazine, which is true. But to an 8-year-old, you don't make those distinctions. You figure they're fighting in the cover, they're going to fight inside the comic. Boo! That never happens.
And yeah, it says now in the same blazing mag, not in the same blazing story, but they have dialogue, you know, and it's very clear that they're interacting in the same scene. It says, "Get back in your history books, android. You've had it." And then the android Human Torch, which if you didn't know, the Golden Age Human Torch was an android. It says, "You need a lesson in manners, kid." And the original Human Torch is just a guide to give them to you. So I mean, they're lying. I mean, that's
yes.
I mean, that's flat out like they didn't even intend. They were just like, hey, let's make a 1-panel fight scene out of this, and then give kind of middling words there, and the kids will be fooled, and we'll sell another 25 cents worth of the Human Torch. Oh man.
Oh, yeah.
What a bunch of stinkers.
I told you I wanted to return that comic book. I wanted to return that to 7-Eleven and say, this is false advertising.
I would agree with that. Let's see. Well, what do you have, Roger, to show off on your big Wallow disappointments?
Well, I could have probably picked out close to 50 issues.
That's a good point. There's a ton of them.
I have to restrain myself because this is a topic which I'm telling you, we have an 8-hour chat on this one, all right? Because they're everywhere. But I picked out some that are very patently misleading and some that are very subtly misleading and some that are just dramatically misleading, right? Like this one here that I have in the middle, right? Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes 238. Now, everybody knows, I'm sure by now, I'm a massive Legion fan, like Lawrence from the Go-To Geeks, Shannon from Solid, the bass guitar guy. All right. So, again, this is one that I saw. I'm like, oh, Starlin cover. It's a wraparound cover, by the way.
Nice.
Okay. So they're pulling out the big guns here, right? Look at this wraparound Starlin cover. Look at that. All right. And you got the Legion in chains here. You got this smoky cauldron in the middle to divide. You're like, this is going to be great. This is going to be fabulous. UPC is on the back cover, which was rare back then. So I'm like, this is great. You got the art right here. And then when you open it up, Alan Milgram explains, oh, we're behind. So we're reprinting these 2 issues from the Silver Age. Okay. Nowhere does it say anything about that. It says an incredible 46-page cosmic classic. These were 24-page comics. So they combined them and misled us. Okay.
I love it. I really like that back cover too, because that's, you're talking not in a time where everything was bagged and board and sold that way, it was all floppies and, and to be able to pick that up and look at the front and back cover and think, wow, I'm really getting something now.
I mean, again, you're star-crossed because, you're looking at the cover, you're not going to look inside. You're like, this is going to be awesome. Of course it's going to be great, right? You're not even, there's no inkling in your mind that it say, oh, there's going to be a reprint. No. So, man, I mean, again, for a Legion fan, that was crushing.
The disappointments abound.
No, the disappointment is mild. I mean, I was absolutely crushed. I was melancholic the whole day after I saw this, right? All right. Here's one where it's a little more subtle, but still misleading, right? And this issue, Grell cover, big Grell fan, obviously.
Mike,
and you see,
as you're saying, Mike Grell?
Yes, Mike Grell.
Okay, all right.
Mike Grell. So, in this cover, you see here this boy here commanding this army of robots to kill the Legion. This never happened in this issue. They were rescuing this kid from out of control robots, totally turned this on his face. He's a brat. Yes, he got there, they rescued him because he hijacked this ship, and his father is rich, and so he thinks he can do whatever he wants, but never and the totality of this story did he ever show any aggression toward the Legion or that he could command the robots. So this one is a little more, subtle, a little bit more of a turn, make it a little over dramatization, but not like, at least it's not a reprint. At least it had something to do with the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is probably more about, just sort of artistic license stuff. But to me, still, this is misleading. Because honestly, the robots were just out of control. It had nothing to do with the boy controlling. Now this is one Kubert cover here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, there are 3 stories in this issue, and it says nowhere here about. There's an Adam Strange story, and I think there's I forgot what the other one, and then there's the Atomic Knight story. This is an Atomic Knight story here, the Cavemen of New York. Well, the Cavemen of New York were these guys that were stuck in this bunker. This is in the future. At this time, it's in the future. It was set like 1980 or something. And yeah, they're just like savage because they're running out of food. But nowhere in this story do they start fighting in the streets of New York and climbing up light poles and and having women that are savaging, that are trying to claw through food. This doesn't happen, and they don't have these. It's totally over dramatized.
It's still a cool cover,
but the cover is cool, but very misleading. Very misleading. They actually, there was a really short take on them about being these kind of. They are somewhat savage, but it's because of radiation or something, and then they turn back to humans, things like that.
Well, I mean, so we are still looking at books that we intended to read, that we picked up because the cover enticed us into the story. So now in modern times where books are arguably, right, not everyone's going to agree with this, but arguably less about the story and more about the cover art than ever. Mm-hmm. Are they doing us a favor by not even trying to relate the crappy story on the cover? Like, let's just get a pinup cover. I mean, are they doing us a favor with that?
Well, I think, the current comics, let me just say, for my collection, I went through, I didn't find very many books. I really didn't find any. I didn't look at every book I owned, but all the books I looked at in preparation for the show, I didn't find any in my collection that had covers totally unrelated to the interiors. So this must be like a superhero problem, because the Golden Age stuff, honestly, the worst it gets for me is like, this Jungle Comics. There's like 4 stories in here, and one of them is these 2 in a world of dinosaurs. This scene doesn't take place, but this dinosaur's in there, and there are other dinosaurs, and this is like a movie poster for the movie that's in there, even though this scene is not in there. Likewise with that, this, same thing with this one. All the Golden Age books I have, the covers are related to a story inside. Sometimes they're taken directly from a panel and embellished into a more theatrical type cover piece. And sometimes they're not panels, but there clearly could be a panel and they're related. Like this, they're fighting a world of dinosaurs. That's related. I don't have a problem with it. So I think this is more of a superhero problem and not like a Golden Age, which is ironic because these covers I collect, these books I collect are for the covers. And it doesn't matter to me if they're related to the interiors. But ironically, they are. And you guys all care because the stories are super crucial in the superhero books. And they're screwing you guys because you're getting covers that aren't related to the interior stories. Whereas I don't care and all my stuff is connected. It's kind of ironic in that way. But, the modern stuff I see, I don't buy it. But I don't have a problem if it's a dream or if it's a scene that could happen in that story, even though it's not directly taken from a panel, like the Cavemen of New York. Yeah, it's related. At least that story's in there, sort of, even if that scene is not, and it's not. They're not fighting or fighting light poles.
That's true.
Or if it's a dream.
I'm showing different levels, you know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have a series somewhere in here. I can't find it, but it's a Fantastic Four versus the X-Men. It's a 4-part miniseries from 1986 or something. Really cool. I love that as a kid. One of the few things I've kept over the years. But the cover on the first one is a scene from the kid's dream.
All those covers are misleading.
The kid's name, but so that's misleading. But it's sort of it's a dream that he has right at the beginning. So that cover sort of pulls you in, like, oh, this is enticing. What is this about? It's a dream, but then at least it's in there, and you find out that was a dream. But then I see these modern stuff, and people are already talking about it in the chat, where they'll have like an Immortal Hulk issue, and they do a Spider-Man cover, and that's such a cop out. It's like they're not even selling comics anymore; they're just selling covers. And they know Spider-Man sells, so let's throw a Spider-Man on top of this Mickey Mouse book. Like, what? It's not even related at all. So, yeah, I mean, I have a problem with it, but it doesn't really affect the books that I buy. But yeah, I mean, it's a total cop-out. If it's like this modern stuff, I feel like they're not even trying. They're just putting on whatever the cover will sell, and they put out variants, and they do covers, and they do a Spider-Man cover on everything. And then most of them are Spider-Man books, but they don't care because people will buy it because Spider-Man's on the cover. And another thing that affects it these days is they have artists who only do covers. I don't even think these artists see the insides, the interiors, or what the story's going to be. They're just told, we need a Spider-Man cover, do a kick-ass Spider-Man cover of him in the cityscape at night. And they don't even know what book it's going to be on. They don't even know what the story is. Whereas the books I collect, most of the cover artists are the artists that did that story inside. Like, Bureau will do interior art, or Doolin or Zolnarowicz or Ditko. They'll do interior stories, and they'll do the art, and then they'll be picked to do the cover for the whole book, even though only one story in there is theirs. And they will draw a really over-the-top cover that relates to the story they drew on the inside. Nowadays, you got guys like, Art Germ, Adam Hughes, Delato. These guys, I don't know, but I would not be surprised if all they do is covers. I never hear of anything else about them other than covers, and they're fantastic artists. But I mean, they don't do any interior art. I think most of these guys that do the covers don't even know what book it's going on or what stories are in that book.
Well, when would they have time to do interior art anyway? Because they're doing umpteen variant covers. So, they couldn't be on a regular book because, they couldn't do the covers. And and the covers are what sell nowadays, it seems like. So.
Yeah, I think it's more of a cover hunt than ever right now. Even when you had all the gimmick covers in the 90s, that was a cover hunt somewhat, but you didn't have you didn't have 10 variants for, a number 13 of a book. It's not even the number 1 books that they're reserving that for, or the 50 or 100 books, or even 1,000. It's just every book.
Yeah, I mean, in 1990 when McFarlane did Spider-Man and they did 4 covers, that was a lot back then. That was like a monumental event. Like, oh my God, have you seen all the covers McFarlane did for the Spider-Man number 1? And they had like the silver, the gold, the polybagged, the platinum. You know what I mean? There's a lot of them, and that was like 4. Now it's like there's double digits for what? For like not anything spectacular.
Just your average book. Nothing even pivotal in the story. They didn't even say, oh, well, this is going to be an important book. You just don't know it yet, so we're going to put out 10 copies, 10 different covers. It's not even a pivotal point in the story. It's like that's completely separate from what they're trying to do. It's wild. It really is quite different now, I think, than it ever has been. But DS, I was going to mention to you, so we've talked some about the art. Let's talk about the titles of some of these books, because I know that in the Golden Age, and maybe this is still a superhero issue, but for instance, that Daredevil that you're showing there, later on in that series, Daredevil isn't even appearing in the comics. And yet it's still titled Daredevil, and it's those little punk kids.
Yeah.
Every time I see a Daredevil book I can afford, it's got these punks on it that I don't want anything to do with. They look like the Power Pack's rotten cousins or something. But you know what I'm talking about? Then
they're sort of like the Little Rascals. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's no Daredevil in that book, and yet it still held the Daredevil title. And
well,
then
he will appear occasionally in like one panel, or they'll talk about him, and his image will be on the like as an icon in the corner of the page sometimes. But yes, you're essentially right. But back then, you're talking essentially Golden Age comics starting at the outset of World War II. 1938, 1939, Germany invades Poland. So that's essentially the start of the war, even though we weren't in it. From 39, 38, 39 through World War II, everything was World War II related pretty much. These publishers had long-running titles at that point, and the war ends, the GIs come home, nobody wants to read about the war anymore. They can't just cancel these books. So they switch them over to some other stuff. And some of the titles persisted for a while without having the same concept or characters that they did during the war. Even Captain America, they changed it over to Captain America's Weird Tales.
Just gonna mention,
it's not a Captain America superhero book anymore, but they kept that title. And then some of them changed entirely to new titles. Some of them were sold to other companies, and they just bought the title. Like L.B. Cole had Star Publications. He bought Star and made it his own. And he had like Blue Bolt. It doesn't have anything to do with the Blue Bolts from prior. He changed it into a horror title and a sci-fi title, but he kept the Blue Bolt name on the book. So yeah, I think there was a lot of circumstances going on in events in history that changed the interiors, and they kept the titles. And some of them went under, and some of them changed interiors, and ultimately some of them changed the titles. But yeah, I mean, it's totally different if you have an Incredible Hulk issue with Wolverine on the front, or Mortal Hulk issue with Spider-Man on the front, and Spider-Man's not in there. Like, that's not because the war just ended. I mean, that's just a total freaking cop-out.
It is different. Yes, it is different, but I think when we're looking at things that occurred in this, mostly, probably, I think most of this started somewhere around the Bronze, where it really started getting bad, with the bait and switching, right around where the reprint started really taking hold. It was being filler issues, and I guess you could say some of that started with the X-Men, and Silver Age books, but it really started taking hold in the Bronze Age. But most of what happens there, I think, from a corporate perspective, starts in a corporate culture that was existing back in the Golden Age of somewhat misleading things. I mean, you can look at the Golden Age numbering. So they start a new book off and a new title with what? Number 13? Why?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes they.
Why is that? That's to fool the person buying it, isn't it?
Sometimes it was done to fool because number one issues, people didn't rush out to buy a number one. They wanted something that they knew was going to be good. And if a book's on issue 13, it's already been running for 12 issues. It must be good. So I'll buy that.
Right.
That was one reason. Another reason is...
Which is a lie.
Yeah, another reason is they changed the title, but they kept the numbering. They changed it from a war title into a horror title, or a horror title into a romance title, and they just kept the numbering and changed the title. So it's essentially the same book. Sometimes they tweak the title, and it would be, instead of Terrors of the Jungle, it would be Jungle Terrors. And if you're collecting Jungle Terrors and it starts at 12, before that's Terrors of the Jungle. So yeah, I mean, sometimes it was legit, and sometimes it was just because people didn't want to buy a number one because it might not be good. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely some marketing ploys that have been going on since the whole history of mankind. Yeah, the Golden Ages got some different ones. But yeah, it was prevalent in the Golden Age. Advertising and marketing has always been like that. Yeah,
and it's not just superhero titles. Like the one I've got here, House of Secrets 91. I missed 92 by 1 here, obviously. But this one here, Neil Adams cover, kind of pseudo gothic, with this huge. I'm assuming there has to be some kind of eagle. Oh yeah, Death of Eagle's talon, right? But the story, there's no women at all in the story. It's a military guy who got clawed to death in an elevator. But again, this is a lot more alluring, to the reader, to have this this picturesque window and this black and white predominant cover with this white, very, very, very gorgeous lady trying to get away. So very misleading to the reader, because once you get inside, Has nothing to do with this girl here
Yeah,
whatsoever.
I think that's different, but I'll address that when you're done. But.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying that, you know, that it's misleading as it pertains to the story inside. Now, the cover is still a great cover, and it does have to do with the eagle, true enough, but it misrepresents what the gist of the story is, which is that this dictator, you know, arbitrarily killed off a rival, and the rival just said, you know, you're going to be getting yours, essentially like a curse or whatever. And the bird, he was called the eagle or something, and that was ended up to be his demise, you know. So again, it's not just the superhero, it's just a way of misleading the reader into perhaps another type of story that is not inside, but the cover allures you more than the actual story inside would if you depicted it accurately.
Yeah, and I think for a book like that, at the time it came out, if you bought that because of the cover and you were disappointed that it wasn't in there, yeah, that's a fair point. I totally get what you're saying. I agree with you. Looking back now, like from today, if I go buy that book, it's not really important to me if that is exactly in the interior, because to me, for books like that, which are more like horror and mystery anthology sort of things, the cover is almost a separate and special part of those kind of books. For me as a collector, it doesn't need to relate to what's on the inside. It could be symbolic. It could just be, you know, a kick-ass horror image. It's a horror book. It's a mystery book. Here's a kick-ass horror or mystery for the cover of this. Doesn't have to have anything to do with it. It's sort of like the trademark of a horror book. You have a cool horror scene on the front. That's a nice centerpiece. And then inside there's cool horror stuff to read and cool mystery and thriller stories. I don't necessarily expect them, you know, half the time they match up, half the time they don't. Even when they do match up, it's mostly symbolic and it's not from a panel anyway. But yeah, I mean, with a superhero though, when I see, you know, the Hulk and Wolverine battling on a cover, I expect them to battle in there, even if it's not in the exact way they're battling on the cover. If they're battling on the cover, they need to be battling on the inside. With a horror book, I expect horror mystery stories throughout. And then I expect the cover to be something, you know, a cool horror, almost like an independent type piece of art that's just horrific and is just going to make that look cool, sort of like a book cover. That's how I feel about it. But I'm a horror, golden age horror collector and cover collector, so I come at it from a different standpoint. But when it comes to superheroes, which I have a long history in superhero comics, when there's superheroes fighting on the cover and they're not fighting in the interior, that's a problem, man. I mean, it's not like that's for the cover. That's the story is more important than the cover on those. And I want to see at least it can be, I will give them artistic license to have a scene not from the story, but you can't have Wolverine and Hulk battling on the cover and the thing and then not have them battling inside. That's just total ripoff there.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly. In fact, I would echo everything you just said. I'm just saying, if we're talking about the intent of the publisher towards the potential buyer, it is misleading. Whether we buy into it or not, their intent is very misleading. It's, to me, it's patently misleading and in a lot of circumstances. Well, I'll get into some later on, but I agree with you. A lot of pre-code anthology, there's artistic license there, and you do not have to exactly follow what's on the cover.
Yeah.
I agree with
and a lot of the pre-code horror books I have, almost all of them, they have the cover, which is a fantastic horror piece, and it will say, "Read inside the stalking of the undead." And the cover will be, you know, zombies coming out of the graveyards, and it's like, this relates to the story Stalking of the Undead. That story's in there, and it is about that type of stuff, but that scene doesn't appear, and there's not 8 zombies crawling out of the cemetery. But, you know, you grant them license in a horror sense because it's sort of like a horror movie poster or just a horror painting. It's like an interpretation, and it's just a kick-ass standalone horror piece, sort of based on that story, but not directly from it. But, you know, the story's referenced on the cover, and it's about that stuff. But I'm not super disappointed when I open it up and that's not exactly what it is. But, you know, that was one artist's drawing of what would symbolize the story inside. So it's more of a symbolizing of the story, whereas superhero stuff I think should be directly related. If you got Spider-Man on the cover, he needs to be in the issue. Done deal. There's no getting around that.
Right.
No wiggle room on that, man. Superman on the cover, Spider-Man on the cover, Wolverine on the cover. They need to be on the interior. That's it. That shouldn't even be a debate. Like, that's ridiculous.
But isn't it better when it all comes together? And you have, even in a horror anthology like this, you got House of Secrets 92. This cover is not misleading, but it offers up a twist that you don't know until you've read the book, right? Mm-hmm. Because just looking at this cover, you would think that this is going to be a monster attacking a girl, right? Mm-hmm. Just a simple monster attack. And look how spooky and scary that is. And it does a good job of being scary. But as you know, from reading the book, he's not, Swamp Thing isn't a real villain in this. He's more of a protector or a revenge seeker, if anything, but he's not really a villain in this. I mean, yes, he kind of kills, but
on the cover.
Huh?
He's not a villain on the cover.
Oh, you don't know what he is.
Right.
All you know is
right,
girl, and there's a scary guy.
It's ambivalent, that's for sure.
No, I would say that he's at least suggested that this is a monster that's about to attack this woman. If you didn't know that,
that's not how I interpret it.
That's because you already know something.
I don't
you already know what's going to happen. Yeah.
Well, maybe, but I mean, she doesn't look ultra frightened. I mean, if you saw that thing and you didn't know, and you're just hanging out doing your hair, and that thing appears behind you, you'd be freaking out. She's not freaking out. She's sort of keeping an eye on it. And he's not like rushing towards her. He's kind of like, hauntingly standing in the back. But it's just, to me, this looks almost, this scene on this cover reminds me of the Frankenstein movie where he's trying to save the little kid and he looks monstrous and the townsfolk go after him because they don't realize he's really got a good heart and they turn him into the monster is the people. That's sort of the dynamic that's going on for me, as just looking at that cover as a piece of art. But yes, I do know the story, so that probably infects my view of what that is. But yeah, I don't take that to be what you are, but on that cover.
That's an effective cover, though, because look at what we're discussing here. We're discussing 3 different points of view. So the misdirection, the uncertainty of the cover tells you that it's an effective cover. It's intriguing, and that's the kind of cover that that I appreciate.
So isn't it better when this happens than all the misdirection? And I mean, you can bring people in and still have twist endings and things that are unexpected and things that are perhaps not the way you thought they would be while reading the story, and still have the reader pleased with what they got. And then when you close the cover, when I closed the cover after reading that, I had even more appreciation for the cover than I did blindly looking at it as art. And so it can even enhance it. It can even enhance the cover and the book, and working together can make it awesome. You know?
And so the reason why that's such a cool and part of the reason why that's such a cool cover is you can interpret it any number of ways. It's got a feeling to it that's different to everyone. It's very evocative. And it could be fear. It could be curiosity. It could be love. You don't understand what's going on just from the cover. Just as a single piece of art, it's like a lot of Frazetta stuff. You're not sure exactly the dynamic between the stuff on the cover or in the painting, but it's interesting and it draws you in, and that's such a cool cover. That's actually back on my want list. As it's a superhero book, I guess technically, but. That's back on my want list, and it'll be a rare quote superhero book in my collection when I get one. But I cannot leave that one aside. When I left superheroes behind, I dumped that with it. I can't do that. That's got to be back in my collection because it's such an iconic horror cover and by a great artist too. So that kind of piece of art doesn't come along often where it has that powerful effect as a work of art.
I would classify at this juncture. I would classify this as horror. Later on, they gave him more superhero elements, but at this juncture, I mean, again, horror does not necessarily mean evil. Let's just make that distinction, right? But it can be interpreted as fearful, as something that is out of the ordinary, supernatural, etc.
Well, so that's probably the second most valuable. Well, I don't know if GSX has passed it yet, but all right, it's definitely a top 3 most valuable Bronze Age books. And I think the reason is Bernie Wrightson, top horror book in the genre, and a superhero first appearance. So I think the superhero, the horror, and the Wrightson, those three factors make that book appeal to a broad comic audience. And that drives the price of it. So yeah, it's not a superhero book to me, but to people who are collecting first appearances in the Bronze Age that are not horror fans, that's a superhero book to them. So, I mean, it's a first appearance of a superhero. So, yeah, I mean, it's a great book all around, which is why it's back on my list.
Yeah, great. This is one I wanted. Go ahead, Bob. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, Roger, we've got a ton of more people in the chat.
Oh, okay.
You want to shout some of these people out? I know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just saw Biggie's in here. How you doing, Biggie? Evan is in here. Very knowledgeable collector. Gretzky, the Archie collector extraordinaire. Super Russ 9000. That's Russ used to be RLM's Comics and Collectibles. Who else is in here? Nerd Vision. How you doing, buddy? Great to see you again. Our buddy Aaron, Deadpool 2323 is in here. I bet you he's either about to go to work or about to sleep. It's like, but thank you for joining us, man. We appreciate it. Who else got in here? Gray Man got in here.
Yeah, we had him. I think that's got us caught up.
Oh, we caught up. All right.
I think so. Well, thank you for that. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Our topic tonight, of course, is misleading covers and interiors, as brought to us by TMC Comics. Had this question, hey, what's going on with that? So here we are explaining what's going on with that. Roger, you're going to show us a Superman and Dracula throwdown, which
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. It's got to be. Look, let's see it.
Yeah, you know about this, right, Bub?
Yeah, I know about this one.
Yeah. Okay. So again, and they even put down here, right, in the tradition of our smash hit Marvel team up mag. So you're figuring, wow, Spider-Man and Dracula are teaming up, or they're fighting. They never meet.
Nope.
Although they are in the same boat and they're paralleling, a lot of the plots. It's actually a kind of a clever story. The way that that's done, it's kind of a mystery. It's kind of a whodunit, kind of a misdirection. I enjoyed it, but a very misleading cover. I mean, incredibly misleading because they never actually do meet, and they're at opposing goals, but they do parallel. A lot of the same characters cross over, but they themselves never meet. So
it's bad when they say they're in the same mag and not in the same story.
Well, now I know that. Back then, I didn't. It took a while for me to get hit over the head with that one, right? I know Marvel speak now. If it says classic, that means reprint. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So don't worry. And if it says representing, that means reprint all day long. All right. Now here's another one. Okay. You buy this issue, you're like, okay, Spider-Man, something happened here. You got the Lizard, Doctor Doom, Dr. Octopus, Kingpin. No, this is a retelling of his whole history, from when Uncle Ben died and he became Spider-Man to the present. It's an album issue. It's just a recap of little flashbacks. There's no story here. It's all just flashbacks.
Yeah, but see, I dig that because that's like a movie poster. Like that is that doesn't. I mean, that's not something I would say that's happening. Those floating heads of those villains over Spider-Man in the cemetery, but that's a classic like movie poster type cover because it's thematically an interpretation of the story inside. I don't have a problem with that one. Is it misleading? To me, it's not misleading because it would get me to buy that book. And then I would understand after reading it, that's an interpretation in like a movie poster. A lot of times on movie posters, you have characters and scenes, interposed over each other, overlaid. And, like Spider-Man and Dracula, they're not, I mean, on that cover, you've got Dracula in the background and then you've got Spider-Man in the front sort of superimposed over him. Yeah, it looks like they might meet based on that cover, but I wouldn't be disappointed. Like, oh, okay, so when I look back at the cover after reading it, okay, so they're just showing like a movie poster style with Dracula in the background and Spider-Man in the foreground. Looks like they're fighting. Are they? I don't know. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to read it. I'm really interested to read this one. So it's a hook and it gets me to buy it. Sort of like a movie poster. I don't feel duped by that.
I agree. I'm just stating that when you look at this cover, you're thinking they're at least going to meet.
Yeah, I mean, I would think they were going to meet, but I wouldn't be disappointed that they didn't. But that certainly, definitely, without a doubt, leads you to think there's going to be a meeting of those two.
I don't know, DS. I think you're skirting the issue. Roger, show that other one there. There it is. The Amazing Spider-Man and the floating heads. I think, DS, if you turn that into CGC, you're looking for a decapitation label. You're looking for a little check mark because it presents better than it really is. I think
you know, I've got a book like that. It's Thing Number 1, a Charlton book from the 50s, and it's got a guy almost in the same pose. That's almost an homage cover, really, but it's probably not. It's just similar, but it's got a guy kneeling down and screaming, and it's got all these shrunken heads floating in. It's the same thing. It's not really what happens in the story, but it's an awesome cover. But maybe I'm just, yeah, like I said, I'm in the minority a lot of times on these type of things. I'm coming at it from a cover collector, and the covers are independent works of art to me that usually supersede, well, almost, they always supersede the stories to me in the books I collect. So if I have to, if the interior and the cover meet in an alley and they're going to fight, I'm going to take the side of the cover. You know what I mean? I'm always going to root for the cover. When there's two are in a boxing match and they're at odds, I'm going to put my money on the cover because I always want the cover to win. I'm a cover collector, so
we just don't know. Like this book here, Tech 400, right? And I know it's silly. I know that it's silly. It's kind of like the floating heads thing, though, where honestly, when I was first conscious of this book in existence, I didn't know about Man-Bat. Right, he was a new character, and to me, it was totally possible with the campiness of Batman at this time. This is a little bit before the extreme camp, but still, it was possible that he took some sort of growth serum and was now like, 50 billion stories tall fighting this giant Man-Bat in the city. Now, this definitely classifies as a movie type poster. No doubt.
No doubt. Yeah.
But since we're dealing with the kind of supernatural or chemically enhanced or whatever in Man-Bat, it was possible that this was actually happening for me. Now, obviously, it doesn't happen. They do fight in the book, kind of, but it's clear that Batman didn't grow to be that big. But
yeah, and I think the cityscape was added on afterwards when they told Neil Adams to put it in. And so it wasn't originally even meant to be there. I think that's the case.
I've read that somewhere myself. Yeah, that was added later on. Yeah.
So what's another misleading one, and you guys might disagree with me on this, but X-Men 101. It's got that,
Phoenix
regal Phoenix image on the front, and it's the first appearance of Phoenix, and she's rising, and it's on the cover. That's like a page 1. The rest of the book, she's not even in it. She's like in a coma or something. And, they're by her bedside and they're trying to decide whether or not to let somebody help or something. I can't remember exactly, but that was a disappointment to me because first appearance of Phoenix, she's only, they navigate through that cloud or whatever, and then they crash and they think she's dead. And she shoots up out of the water and she's overcome with energy and collapses. And they take her to the hospital. And that's it. She's not in the rest of the book. Now it's her first appearance. But I mean, what a disappointing story that was, honestly. Now, it's a key book. And the art is fantastic, and it's a good story, but it's not a Phoenix story. I'm sorry, it's just not to me.
Yeah, I agree. Now, somebody in the chat, I put this one up. Why do you think I put this one up?
Because it's a cameo. Actually, not a first appearance. It's a cameo or whatever you want to call it. To me, it's still a first appearance. I'm going to throw that out there. But it's known as a cameo. He's not in the story, but he is on the cover.
Yeah. I mean, right? Look at the. It's not so much the look at the wording on the cover. His name is Bishop, and nothing will ever be the same. Mm-hmm. I mean, something is that hyperbole? Absolutely. Yeah. Because he only appears on the very last page. with these other two guys. That's it. You know, that's the only time we see him on the cover and on the very last page. So when I see this cover, I'm thinking this story is going to be centered on this character and, you know, these three characters. And again, it's all kind of background information. It's all kind of leading up to him, but he only appears on the very last page. So to me, when I bought this comic, I thought that was misleading.
Yeah, I think that's misleading too. I totally agree with you. As far from a collector standpoint, and like technically, is it a first appearance? Is it a cameo? It's better than a cameo because he's got a cameo, but he's also center stage on the cover. So that makes it more arguably a first appearance, but it could be a cameo. But aside from the technical collecting value aspects, key aspects, yeah, I totally agree with you. That's misleading. He's not even in there. Like he's saying, it's not just like he's on the corner in the cover and like, ooh, who's this new guy down here in the corner they drew?
Right.
No, that's the book about him. The story's about him. He's mentioned they even used a different type, different font for his name, and like it's clearly I'm buying this because I want to read about this new guy Bishop, and it's like not even in there. Yeah, that's a fake out right there.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's like what 92 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's not actually it's 91, I believe. Yeah, 91. Yeah. So that's why I put it. That somebody in the chat was asking why I put it, and that's why I put it. Not is the character it's not misleading as such that the character doesn't appear. It's not that. It's just that it gives it the impression that there's going to be a story revolving around these characters, and really it's the next issue where the story revolves around them. This is just, you know, the lead up to them. So
yeah, and you know, misleading, some of these asked if misleading is the same as a lie. TMC did. Mm-hmm. Sometimes is my answer, because in this case, I think that's a straight out lie. They know that this cover is going to entice people to read a book for something that they're not providing, and it's purposeful. That's a lie. When you have, you know, Spider-Man, the death of Spider-Man, is he going to finally die? There's been a whole many of those. And they show Spider-Man on the cover like dying. He doesn't die. That's misleading. It draws your curiosity, and he escapes death, and he's never in the deathly pose that he's on the cover maybe, but that I can give them artistic license. That's sort of like a hook line. It's like a trailer. It gets you interested without being a lie. It is misleading in a sort of an artistic way to entice you and to get you interested. Not the same as that Bishop cover. Those are both misleading, but in a different way.
Yeah, that's somebody in the chat wanted to know if he was on the last page. Yeah, that's where he is right there. That's
yeah, but I mean, it's the same as a cover.
Pretty much. The three guys are on there, except he's holding this. Who is this? I don't know who that is. I haven't read this issue in forever. But yeah, it's pretty similar to the cover. Like, and somebody did say maybe this is supposed to be the cover for the following issue. So yeah, maybe, but it isn't. It's the cover for this issue. So.
Yeah, and my answer to Evan's next question, I don't think that's not misleading. That's just a failure.
Yeah, I like that.
I think they wanted him to be big news, and he didn't happen. So you can't hold failures against them as lies, but they tried. I mean, it's tough to come up with a new character that's going to be a hit. It really is. I mean, you take the major powers are already taken, you know, flying, visible sight, becoming a giant or becoming small. I mean, most of it being psychic, all this stuff's already taken. It's tough to come up with a superhero.
It is.
With new powers and a new costume and a new background that's not already going to seem like it's already been done. It's very tough to do.
I like some of these somewhat misleading covers too, which still misleads people who never read the story, right? So you have some great Dave Stevens work here. You know, I got to throw some of my favorite artists in front of the camera whenever I can. And a lot of people call this cover rapey and stuff like that. But if you read the story, which you can't right now, but if you read the story, you see that that's this cover and several other covers around it in the Crossfire series is Crossfire, right? He's like an agent, and he's hunting down a murderer of Hollywood impersonators. So no, Marilyn Monroe is not in this book, but a woman who's impersonating Marilyn Monroe is. There's another one that has like Elvis on the cover, you know, and that's an Elvis impersonator that gets killed, you know. So there's a little bit of shock and a little bit of adding, you know, kind of there but not there characters. I'm thinking of also the first appearance of Domino, right? in New Mutants 98, but then it's not the real Domino. And you to think about like the Clone Saga with Spider-Man, how they just retcon everything because they didn't want to make Ben Reilly the dude anymore, you know? You know? So, I mean, you think about the different things they can do. And sometimes I don't think it's premeditated because that was brought up in the chat, you know, are these things always premeditated or is it just the wrong cover winding up in the book or what? And I think that sometimes it's not premeditated, but sometimes it's retconned to the point where they wipe out history and change things and kind of, you know, mess with what you knew up to that point on purpose. That's got to be considered on purpose.
X-Men 35 is another one. The X-Men title, very quickly into the run, I say very quickly, by issue 35, for sure, it was losing popularity, and they're struggling to keep it alive. And they've really kept that thing on life support and then just started doing reprints and, you know, almost completely died. But at number 35, they put Spider-Man on the cover, but it's a changeling. It's not even Spider-Man. But they specifically had him be the Spider-Man so they could put Spider-Man on the cover because they thought that would help increase sales to put Spider-Man on the cover because Spider-Man held strong. So they're like, let's put Spider-Man on the cover. How can we do that? We got a villain we can do make him Spider-Man. Yeah, that's dishonest and misleading, but they tied it into the story sort of. But I feel like their motives there were just to keep the sales going and keep that book alive. This is sort of misleading. Yeah, that's not ideal. And that, you know, whenever, look, the history of comics since 1961 is, for Marvel, is when something is hurting, introduce Spider-Man somehow. Get Spider-Man in there one way or another, and that will help. That's like no matter what. If something's going bad, Spider-Man. That's like the answer. Put him on the cover. Put something with Spider-Man.
Yeah, Wolverine took a turn at it as well. You're right, Roger. And I think the new thing, and it's not really new, but you know, everything is pretending, in my opinion, to be the next Secret Wars crossover of all titles. And I always know. And pardon my French. Well, you know what? I'll just revise what I was going to say. How about that? JB was in the chat for a minute here, and you know he's always shouting us out as a family-friendly show. So every now and then I got to catch myself.
All ages show.
All ages, yeah. But I'm going to tell you, I heard these words when I was young. But anyway, I think that everything's trying to be the new Secret Wars. But I'm already calling shenanigans, put it like that. I'm already calling shenanigans when I see that one of the tie-ins to War of Realms occurs in a Squirrel Girl book. Once you're telling me that I have to buy Squirrel Girl to have the complete collection of this story arc, I'm out. I'm done. Because I know that that's the only Squirrel Girl book I'm ever going to buy. And the only reason why you're making me buy it is so that I can have a complete collection of the story arc. So I quit. I can't do it. You can't make me buy your worst titles, your most underperforming, poorly selling titles, just to have a complete story arc. That's ridiculous, I think.
Well, otherwise nobody's going to buy Squirrel Girl. I mean, in the 80s, you can look at Comic-Con, but you know, in the 80s, if a book was selling like less than, I don't even think it got to 50,000 copies, but you know, 50,000 copies. A book selling, it's canceled long before it even reaches
Never
that.
make it there. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got books like Squirrel Girl and some other ones are selling like 6,000 copies. That's like, you know, that's terrible. That's terrible. They need to just cancel them, but they don't. They do crossovers and they do covers and variants and they try to keep them alive. But I'm not a modern collector. I'm not going to get into all this because I don't know what I'm talking about half the time. But that, you know, it really bothers me when they're spending resources though on a book that's selling 7,000 copies. Are you kidding me? Cancel that shit and put those people on another book or something.
Hold on, we just went to PG-13.
I said that I had to change what I said.
We just went to PG-13 here.
It's an hour in. There's no moderate.
Edit that out, Bub. Edit that out.
Go to bed, kids. Go to bed.
Golly, look at this. I'm shaking. I'm shaking. Hey, but you know that DS, that stuff was going on even back in the Secret Wars 2. It was an egregious example of that. Yeah. You know, when you had to buy Dazzler and Thing, which were comics which were just going down the tubes like
Thing was a reprint run already.
Excuse me?
wasn't Thing already a reprint run by the time they were doing the tie-in?
Oh no. It was still being published with new stories, but but the Dazzler, boy, that really went downhill fast, really bad. The Sienkiewicz covers were the only redeemable quality in that comic, but and again, you had to, and they touted these crossovers like they were just mega important, that they were vital, and some of them were just very tangential. So those kind of shenanigans, to use BUB'S lexicon, were done way back when. But you see, and here this started, and this is not a misleading cover. First of all, let me just say that it's not misleading. To me, it's a missed opportunity, and I guess you can see this different ways. This has the prologue to the Avengers Defenders War in the back, a few pages of it. Now, why would you tout a story with a troglodyte and some nightmare from the outer limits here, instead of saying, hey, read the prologue to the upcoming Avengers Defenders mega crossover? You see, but in the Bronze Age, they didn't think like that. They didn't think they didn't tout things the way that they do. If this was going on today, this would be 20 variants. There would be umpteen different characters on the cover, and there would be emblazoned here, prologue to the crossover of the millennium.
Right.
Yeah.
So
you're right.
To me, this is a missed opportunity cover. It's not misleading, but it could have been a lot more than what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff we're talking about has always been prevalent, but some of it has become far more prevalent for a different reason. They tried to do Secret Wars 2 and the tie-ins with all the characters because Secret Wars 1 was such a smashing success, arguably the best storyline of the 80s. I know Infinity War is going to be up there now, especially after the movie's out. A lot more people are aware of it. But now they're doing crossovers to sell books. They're not doing crossovers to try to make a good story. Back then, they were like, let's try to make another awesome story and get some new character. Like, I think they were still trying to do something good because something good sells. Now they're not trying to do something good. They're just trying to sell. They're like, sales are down because this stuff is terrible. Let's just try to do a gimmicky thing and create crossovers and tie-ins, and let's just reboot the series every week with a new #1 so we can get more sales. They're not interested in putting out something good. They're just interested in coming up with fancy gimmicks to sell more books, as opposed to doing something good to sell more books. I feel like they've taken on a different way of getting more sales now, is gimmicky stuff and tricks. As before, it was trying to come up with good stories, and a lot of times the stories would fail, and they weren't good. It's not always good stories in the 60s and 70s.
Oh, no, no, certainly.
I mean, a lot of the 60s superhero stuff is terrible. I mean, the stories are horrible, and this Bronze Age is no different. And there's good and bad in all of them.
Sure.
But I feel like if you try to put out something good and it fails, and you cancel it and you move on, that's sort of like the natural business process along every industry. But now they don't try to put out something good. They just try to sell something in a nice wrapper, and they don't cancel anything. Just keep adding more crappy stuff with wrappers to the market, and eventually you have $10,000 wrappers, and that's how you get your $10,000, as opposed to having a couple rock solid sellers. I don't know.
Well, but somebody must be buying them, because they wouldn't be in business unless somebody. And I don't know how much longer they will be, but I'm saying at this point, they're still in business, and I see people buying things left and right, and things being sold out. People going to multiple LCSs looking for things.
Yeah, I mean, but I think there's stuff some of it is selling still. I mean, but a lot of it is not selling. It's not selling. I mean, you've got books. There's multiple Marvel books under 20 grand selling 20,000 issues. That means it's not selling. Do you know how many people are in the country that are interested in comics and they can only sell 20,000 copies of an issue? That's like a small town. It's ridiculous. And there's a lot of them like that.
Town,
a lot of them.
Yeah. That's my town. I can drive 7 miles each way, and I'll be out of town.
Yeah, it's basically like if the Girl Scouts went around your town, they would sell as many boxes of cookies as Marvel is selling comics in the whole country. It's ridiculous.
Exactly. Right. To me, it's a ridiculous. I never thought it would get this bad. You know.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say people aren't buying, and there's some stuff that's still being bought. And I think the only thing keeping it alive at this point is some of the core titles, and some stuff that is decent. And then you have just the cover gimmick. They have some of the best artists, just technical artists ever, with some of the best tools and technology, digital and all that, that they are just putting out stellar, sparkling works of art on the covers that you almost can't not buy if you're into that stuff, because they're just so good. That's what's keeping a lot of the modern comics alive. But I mean, half of Marvel's portfolio is junk and it's not selling, and the numbers would be laughed at in the 80s.
Yeah. I just don't know why they bother to keep all those titles alive when it seems like if you consolidated the money that they're already spending on these artists into some interior work and consolidated them into core titles, or even if you started a new character, I mean, it seems like we get a new #1 every month. There's another #1 for core characters, for core, offshoots. What used to be more of a what if type scenario. Now you're getting entire, storylines, mini series, and stuff like that. And it seems like even your core characters are present in 5 or 6 different titles every month.
Yeah, but I think they're not. It's not like they are spending a lot of money as the go down. Their input into these titles goes down too. There's a lot of artists out there that are brand new in the last 5 to 10 years that people never heard of before, and they're new and they're inexperienced. They don't have the talent yet, and they're being overworked and they're being underpaid. Honestly, they're not putting a lot of money into the art and the writing of these books that aren't selling. They just refuse to cancel them. They just want to keep them all on life support. So a lot of these writers and artists are not making that much money, and they're overworked, and they're just having to pump out stuff, and it's not getting edited properly. And I don't think they're putting a lot of money into some of the lower stuff, like the bottom half. They're not putting a lot of money into it, and they're not getting a lot of money out of it. And it's a vicious cycle that's just killing people like me, respect and the interest in current comics.
Yeah.
Well, you have to remember also that DC and Marvel, that comics are small potatoes for them at this point, because they're corporate giants that own these properties now, that have so many revenue streams that are of a much higher echelon than comics, that I don't know how much they actually pay attention to it. I mean, I think that that's sort of like, hey, you deal with that division, you do the best you can, but I don't think that they're overly concerned if they sell 5,000 or 20,000.
Yeah, it's almost like the comics are secondary to the movies, and
I would say even tertiary. I think the movies and then the marketing is the secondary, and then comics are way down the line.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of the 80s, because they had superhero and comic book movies in the 80s, and they're mostly the best ones were average. So, but the comics were awesome. It's like the opposite now. The movies are awesome, and the comics are subpar. And it's like the comics have taken a back seat to the very thing that they're the centerpiece of. And it's sort of like a backwards. I don't know where it's going. I just know it's hurting right now.
Well, and a comic bro is saying not all the comics that are coming out now are rags. And I don't think any of us are saying that.
No,
I think what we're saying is, why not focus on the books that are good and that they're good because they're selling well, instead of continuing publishing ones that suck, and then Diamond forcing every comic shop to buy 1,000 of them in order to get the one variant they know is going to sell regardless of how much the book sucks.
Yeah, I just, in the 80s, I remember when I got into comics as a kid and a teenager in the 80s and into the 90s, invariably almost all the comics I would buy were either awesome or pretty good. It was rare I got one that stunk. It was rare. And if it was because I accidentally bought something that was meant for as a kiddie comic, and I'm like, well, this is not meant for me. This is for a little kid. Mm. But now I would say, I don't know. I don't read this stuff as much as everybody else, but I sort of keep up on it a little bit. But there's far more books that they're not putting effort into that are not good. The ones at the top are still good. There's still a lot of good stuff out there, but the stuff at the bottom is far worse than the stuff at the bottom was like in the 80s. And what they should do is just cut the fat off the bone, and whatever resources are there, devote it to the other stuff, like the top 25 titles or the top 15 titles, and just cut off the rest and put those resources into making what's already good even better and bring back comics to where they're just spectacular, all of them. So yeah, there's good stuff, but there's far more bad stuff at the bottom than there ever was, is what I'm saying.
Isn't that what DC is doing now a little bit? Aren't they cutting back a lot of their titles? I think they canceled the Vertigo, and they're kind of putting things into 3 different categories, age, and different ages, like for different ages, like a youngster, middle, and then adult. I think that's what they're doing. They're actually trying to reform the way that they're selling comics so that they tailor these different age groups.
Yeah, and I have no problem with that either. I think that they should be reforming. I think that DC is doing a better job of it, honestly. As far as the publishing goes, they still have a crap ton of titles, and they still have like 6 Batman books going on right now, and met with varying reviews. And a lot of people are just picking up those core titles because they just feel like they have to keep picking up that title. And on the Marvel side, it's I think a lot of other than Amazing Spider-Man, there's a lot of titles that had strong followings that have lost their followings with all the reboots and number ones and everything that they've done. I think Marvel is having a harder time than DC when it comes to that. That's my opinion.
Well, when they have a book like Iceman, which, not to go into how they completely changed who Iceman was, it's not even the same Iceman, but whatever. They had an Iceman title. They tried something new with it. Good for you. Try something new. Be creative. It didn't work. It flopped. It was selling 6,000 or 7,000 issues a month. It's horrible. They canceled it. Then they brought it back with the same writers and the same artists and the same thing. Why? Why are you doing that? I mean, if you're going to bring it back, make it better. You're just doing the same thing that failed before. For what? To push some type of agenda? Or I don't get it.
It's a cash grab. It has to be.
And Squirrel Girl could be something good if they do what it is. I mean, it's not meant to be what they're trying to make it, and it's like it's got this goofy, sarcastic, sort of annoying thing to it that most people are turned off by. It's not like a lovable story, sort of, and it's, I don't know, it seems to be turning off a lot of people, which is why sales are being canceled. If you like Squirrel Girl, good for you, but they're not doing it to get enough people to like it. There's too few people that like it. You either need to just cancel it outright, put that character on a team, or just reboot it and do it different with different artists and just like ground up. But to just keep these things alive that are selling 6,000 issues, it's like, why are you doing that? You have stuff that's good. Put some of these writers or some of these artists up there and get some experience, do some other stuff. You can, I don't know. It just seems like a waste.
You're doing a really good job of dancing around the politics of it, and that's fine. I don't want to get too heavy into it either. But that's basically what you're saying without saying it. Is at the core of this, there are political movements that seem to be more excited about the idea that something exists and that something has been done than it being actually successful on its own merits. And I think as long as that mentality exists within the publishing house, it's very difficult to cancel anything based on merit because it doesn't matter. It exists is already a success. The fact that it's being sold is the only success that's necessary, not sales. So, I think it stinks, but that kind of seems the way things are right now.
Yeah, a company shouldn't be pushing things on principles. They should be pushing things on profit. And the higher the profits go, that means more people like it. And the company should not be pushing out literature based on principle. They should be pushing it out based on profits. Because the higher the profits, the more sales, that means more people like it. And that's what they should be doing. They try different things. They try to have some political aspect to this or some interesting aspect to this or whatever. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't, you need to cut it loose and try again with something new. You don't keep it alive on principle. Companies don't survive on principle. They survive on sales and profits. And those are directly reflecting what the public wants, what the readers want. If you put out something that people don't read and don't buy, that's no good. Regardless of whether your principles are there, they could put out a World War II patriotic thing and if nobody buys it, all right, it didn't work. Yes, the principles are phenomenal. Patriotism, it's great. But you don't keep something alive that's failing because of principles if you're a company. And, that's because people don't like it or don't want it or aren't buying it. But they don't do that. I think Marvel especially is doing that. They keep things alive based on principle. they refuse to let something go based on principle. And then it's, you know, only thing that's really hurting is comic shops, because we can stop buying it and then we don't have to spend the money on it. But what's comic shops going to do? I mean, you know, they're like being held hostage by Diamond too. So there's a lot of problems.
That's a whole nother dynamic we've discussed before. And, you know, and I think we all agree that that's the case. But, you know, if a for-profit company with a board of directors that, you know, you would think that if this mattered to them, that they be more involved in the profits, like you're saying, and the editorial aspect of publishing. But I don't really see that, because, again, we're talking about a very small profit margin, if they're making it at all, versus the other multi-million and billion-dollar grossing entities that they have.
Yeah, I agree. I just think that right now there seems to be a disconnect between, you know, really when we were younger, each of us, when we were each younger, I think that there was always a bit of a quasi counterculture to comics. You know, it was always a subset of the regular group of kids. You know, I remember as a kid reading comics that most kids were, even though I played baseball too, but, you know, most kids were into sports. Most kids were into sports cards, and collecting when I was a kid was much bigger than comic cards and collecting were. And people were kind of more, the fact that I read comics was not really like, you didn't want your book bag to tip over and comics slide out. You know, that was just, you know what I mean? It was just a little bit different. And
you never got a date if that happened.
Yeah, it's just a different kind of group that we were in as comic readers and collectors, mostly readers at that time for me. But I think that same kind of misfit culture that we were each, I assume, a part of in our time each, that same misfit culture now is different. You know, misfits are celebrated now. And not just the nerdy type misfits, but all misfits, meaning anyone that is in any way counter to what like their parents' generation wished they had turned out to be, whatever that means, be it a different political ideology, a different sexual orientation, a different religion, just anything that's different than what the umbrella generation approved of is now kind of misfit and yet celebrated. And when we were kids, you were a misfit, but you weren't celebrated. Like nobody was like, oh, you're a comic geek, good for you. You know, like nobody, you do your thing, you're awesome just for being you, and you're so brave for reading your comics in the middle of the schoolyard when you know someone's coming to rip them up in front of you. You know, no, that never happened. And now the culture seems to be much more sensitive to those misfits, encouraging of those misfits, and really developing a new normal out of that group. And so the problem is that doesn't mean they're buying comics, you know, just because you want to put out publications that further that message and corroborate all the other forms of media that are basically saying the same story and the same message to these kids. It doesn't mean that they're turning to this media and embracing it and accepting it. It's almost like the battle is won, that you got this comic made and it's pushing a particular view, and yet they don't care if it sells because the kids have this to turn to. Now there's someone like you in a comic. Congratulations. When I was a kid, I didn't want to see someone like me in a comic. I wanted to see someone way better than me in a comic. That was fun. That was fantasy. Now it's like less fantasy and more, no, someone like you is the hero. That doesn't interest me. I don't want to see it. Doesn't. You know, I enjoy this fantasy of it all when I was a kid, and even now still. You know, so it's just, I think it's a different way that they handling kids now, and those kids aren't reading comics. So if you're tailoring these comics to those kids, those new band of misfits, it's like an odd fit. It's not really going together. And I think that's another reason why sales are down, because it's not the media that's preferred by this group. So, you know,
well, there's a lot more media around now for kids than there was when I was a kid in the 80s. I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have a computer. I mean, video games, you know, there was the one kid down the street that had video games, and we all try to go hang out at his house and hope you'd be the first one there so you can get that second controller. But, you know, now everybody has video games. You have cell phones, you have computers, you know, there's all kinds of stuff. So now comic books, this paper in your hand media is fighting for space, and they're doing it in the wrong way. Putting out something visually stunning, that's not a good way to compete with all the other stuff out there that's already visually stunning. You need to put out something that has the advantage that comics have, or the difference they have over all the other media if they want to compete for space, is they have a book that is combined with art that can be exciting and can be an escape from reality, and it's fantasy and it's heroes and villains and it's exciting, but it's the combination of reading a book with awesome art combined. You can't get that on a cell phone. You can't get that on a computer. You can't get that from a movie or video games as much. You can only get that from reading a comic book, because but what they're doing is they're trying to push out, they're pushing covers, they're pushing events, they're tying things to movies. That's not what comics aren't going to sell unless they take advantage of what they have that all these other digital modern media don't have, and that's the pages within them. You can read a great story with great art and carry it around and trade it and follow the next issue and collect them, and they have value, and you know, that's what comics have, but they're not marketing them like that anymore. They're marketing a cover artist who did a great work of art that, you know, you can buy a print of, or you can download something on your computer, or you can play video games that look like they're real. You know, there's all kinds of crazy visual media out there. A cover is not going to do it. You can't compete with these other things with just cover art, because everything is cover art in the media. You can't compete with books, because books only apply to people who really want to read and create the image with their mind. But this is a combination of both, and they're not taking advantage of that. That's what I think.
Amen.
I agree.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir, buddy.
Yeah, I know. We're kind of talking to each other. We already know we agree. You know, that's part of what we do here. This is our little group. Well, thank you all for joining us too. I think that overall, what we're saying, and I know it's a little off topic to where we started, but overall, what we're saying is that we know that comics are out there for someone, and they're definitely targeting a group. It just seems like if sales are bad, you're either targeting the wrong group or you're giving them the wrong thing. It's one or the other, or possibly both.
Possibly both.
And it seems like both the major companies are doing some form of each of those things. And it would be nice if they targeted me again. But you know what? I had my time when I was younger. I had my times of getting fooled by comics. You know, I had all that, and in a sense, there's still a lot of books that I can collect. And honestly, if they were targeting me, I'd be broke. Like I can't afford $5 a comic. That's something we hadn't even talked about, is the price of these things. You know, I can't afford a $4.99 comic to be involved in the storyline, because they're not even, you know, I've always appreciated books that were a storyline didn't really go past more 2 or 3 issues. You know, 1 would be great. I love self-contained books, but 2 or 3 issues is about all I can handle. That's already these days $15 of an investment in a story, in a single story. I mean, that's getting really expensive, you know, and I know not only kids can't afford it, but I can't afford it. You know, not when I can spend that same money, you know, add a little bit more to it and get a tried and true great story, great book that I know I'm going to enjoy from yesteryear. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would get back in it if something struck me that was sort of reminiscent of DC comics in the 80s. That would be the type of thing that would entice me to go back to the LCS on Wednesday and get the new issue of it. I would want something, just if you're familiar with DC comics in the 80s, that kind of stuff is what I like. At this point, the DC mid-80s stuff. If they came out with stuff like that, that quality of art and storytelling, I would be back in. But I don't see any of that right now, and I've probably missed a couple. But when something comes along, I'll try it out again. And you know, I look at things every now and then, and I don't share too much about it. But I keep up on this stuff enough that I leave my options open, and my interest is out there, and I'm available. So when they put something out, it will catch me. I won't let it go by. But That's what I'm waiting for, and I will get back in, but I don't think they're doing that right now. I'm not. Look, I'm collecting cover art. The variant covers are great. I'm already collecting cover art. I'm not looking to get into modern comics for cover art. I already got cover art that's way too expensive. I want something different than what I already have to get back in, and that would be like, you know, solid, dark storytelling with good character development and good art and just solid writing. It doesn't have to be super exciting. You know, the closest thing to it is probably like some of the Image stuff is decent, I think. Some of the independent stuff's better, but yeah, so that would get me back in. And you know, if anybody has anything, throw it my way. I'll check it out. But that's what I'm looking for. And I think there's a lot of people like me on the sidelines that will get back in if something like that comes along.
Yeah, it'd be nice. And we are recreating the comic publishing industry. We can't do that. The only thing we can do is complain about that the insides don't match the outsides. That's it. That's what we're on tonight.
Well, and my goal here is not, I mean, individually, my goal is not to get subs or get people to like me. It's just to stimulate thought and discussion on various topics and make people think about things in a way they maybe haven't before. That's what I'm shooting for. So, you know, I think we do a good job of that on the show overall.
I think so. It's what we strive to do. Entertaining and informative is what we're here for. If you want to hear people just laugh at each other for an hour to 5 hours, there's auctions you can watch of model.
Yeah, there you go.
Dude, I love watching those auctions, man. I watch so many auctions. They don't even know I'm watching because I never bid on anything. I don't really chat. I just watch it because they go on for 2-3 hours sometimes. I just leave them on all night and just watch them.
There was an 8-hour auction the other day. An 8-hour auction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big Lion Cat had it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he has some long ones, and Thoro Kuburo has some long ones. I like when they have one on a night where I'm chilling and I don't have anything to do, and the auction comes on and it's like Big Lion Cat or something. I'm all over it because I know I got something to do for the next 3 hours. I love it.
Man, they go on for a while. I couldn't believe it, and still in like hour 5 or 6, there were a couple of good books getting thrown up there for sale. So
yeah, New York Warriors does a good auction like every Tuesday night. And I love watching theirs. Those are cool dudes, and I never buy anything. I never bid on anything, but I just love watching them.
I'm busy watching the Golden Guys on Tuesday night, which used to be every 5th Tuesday, and now I think it's
every week,
twice every Tuesday, or something like that.
Yeah, I guess it's every Tuesday now.
Catch DS every week on the Comic Core.
Yes, he's on the Comic Core, and Roger's on the Comic Core. Come to think of it,
no, I'm not.
Well, I think once you're on, you're in. I think that's the deal.
I'm not. That's it. That was just a one-shot thing.
No, it doesn't matter. Once you're in, they automatically add you, so you're part of the Comic Core now. Once you've ever appeared on there, I think that's the shtick with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I just know that there's a show that JD asked me to do on Tuesday nights because of Golden Age books, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And you know, I don't know. It's on the Comic Core, which does a lot of shows. I don't know the intricacies of the Comic Core. Or, you know, I just know that I'm on that show, and usually, you know, 2 hours before the show, there's a text like, "We doing a show tonight?" And then, so we don't really have topics half the time. We just sometimes somebody gets a guest, and we do 4 people instead of 3, and it's just whatever. We just randomly talk about Golden Age stuff. Yeah, I don't know that there's much of a plan for it, but I see a lot of stuff on Comic Core, so I guess it's like a channel. And if you want to have your own show on there, you can apply for it to somebody. I don't know. Seems to be quite a few people that have the password to sign on to that channel to do a show, but I don't get that involved in it, man. I don't know.
That's fair. Well, check DS out on that channel. Every now and then you can catch Metarog on there, apparently, or at least once.
I don't know.
We don't know. Well, stay tuned for that. And also, aren't you also doing are you still doing the what is that? 7 hours to read a 20-page comic? What is it? What's that show called?
Graders Notes.
Graders Notes.
Graders Notes. Where 7 people read 1 page of a book.
4.
What?
4 people.
I don't know.
4. You know, unless you're counting me for 2 for some reason. I mean, because
you go twice.
Bub needs instant gratification. If he has to put in time and thought, he loses interest quick. You know. Yeah, you got to have some fireworks in the first minute and a half of Graders Notes for him to stick around, or he's out.
That's a lot. That show's a lot of fun to do. Let me tell you. And the guys I'm with are just fabulous. You know, just like you guys. But I love that. That's a whole different dynamic. That's all about one comic. So we just dissect it. We eviscerate the comic. So I love that kind of stuff.
And I think that's on. Is it Comic Head 84's channel?
Yes, it'll be on Comic Head 84 from now on. Yes.
And when's your next one coming up?
Should be this Thursday.
Awesome.
Yep.
So if you like this team is what I'm getting at. If you like this team of the three of us, you can catch at least one of us on 3 nights a week. So that's pretty good. I think that's some exposure out there.
We're bi-weekly. We don't do it every week. We do it every 2 weeks.
All right. Just check your local listing.
Just check your local listing. check JB in the morning or afternoon, and we'll be on there.
Check JB's channel.
Yeah, ironically, one of the best shows to watch on YouTube is JB talking about what are the best shows to watch on YouTube. It's one of the most fun things to watch. Is just to put on his thing in the morning. I don't watch it in the morning. I'll watch it at night a lot of times. And he's so exciting to watch, and it's like professionally done. It's such a cool channel guide thing.
It is.
Yeah, really cool to watch.
Yeah, I do like it. So, all right, guys, I think we've beat this old mule.
Yeah, there's maggots coming out of it.
Yeah, I know. That poor thing. But, in answer to TMC's question, his burning question, should he get back into modern books or start delving back into collecting more modern books in spite of the covers seemingly having nothing to do with the interior of the book? Our universal answer is, if you want. I think that's pretty much. I think what we've shown, though, is that it really hasn't changed. You can find examples of this going back into the golden age, not as much, but some, the roots of it at least. There's a little bit of a dip in the silver. There's not too much of it. And then, but that does start the reprints in Silver Age. And then you come into bronze, it starts getting pretty bad. Copper for sure. And modern is laden. Almost the rule is that it won't have anything to do with the interior. So, but as many people in the chat have said, there's still lots of good books out there and lots of good stories going on. So in spite of that, you may want to check out some modern books that are recommended by those you trust. We don't have any of those recommendations here tonight, but someone does. So there you go. I hope that's clear as mud for you.
Yeah, and I'm going to check out a recommendation that Tony Guagliardo suggested. He said any title by Brubaker and Phillips would be up my alley. Kill or Be Killed, Fatale, Criminal, etc. So if you like the stuff I like, you might also check those out, because I will check those out. All right. I'm not going to do a video about it, but I will check them out in private on my own, and I'll decide if I like them.
All right. While DS checks out his privates, or whatever he said, we're going to... just teasing. I do want to say that you hear a lot about modern books that are very good. I can't endorse them all, but hot books storyline wise versus covers. I know I hear Immortal Hulk is still really good. I didn't care for it too much, but I kind of checked out early, around issue 6 or so. I checked out, so I hear it's still really good. Batman Who Laughs is supposed to be still really good. So there are, and I think it's coming to an end soon. So there are books that people are saying are out there and are good. So maybe just watch channels that do more modern reviews, and maybe you'll find some great books to get hooked into. So there you go. I mean, I still do that for older books. When I see a channel go through some back issue books that I didn't even know exist, I'm all over that. I got to have that. So
yeah, I watch White Whale's show weekly about where they review New Comic Book Day review. And as soon as they actually get a positive review of one of these, I might check it out. But invariably on that show, they give it 2 thumbs down. Everyone they pick, they give it 2 thumbs down. I think they recommended 1 or 2 ever. But
wow, I got to check that out.
Yeah, really, that's the standout issues. So okay, guys, I appreciate everybody being part of the chat tonight. Of course, I couldn't be more blessed to have Roger and DS with me tonight. We're coming up on a year. of this show. It's really hard to believe. I still feel like it's only been a few months when I think about the time that I spent with DS. When I think about the time I spent with Roger, you know where I'm going with this, Raj. It's been like 10 years. That's just how it feels. And I still can't get you to put the toilet seat down. It's been rough. But but really, it's been a blessing to have you guys, the team I wanted and the team I got. And really just it's been awesome. I want to thank you guys again. You'll both be here next week, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
All right. So we'll talk some more about it then, and maybe do a little bit of a thank you show for some of the past revisit some of our past shows and talk about some of that. So sounds like fun. You guys, thank you so much in the chat, and we'll start saying our goodbyes. DS, we'll start with you.
All right, everybody do your homework. See you next week. Bye.
Thanks. Roger, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks everybody in the chat. I mean, again, great suggestion. I think this is Tim who suggested it. Again, I could go on forever on this topic, and I have many books here to the right, but all I'm saying is that misleading is kind of it's almost like a puzzle that you have to put together. And look for keywords, look for clues, and you can sort of decipher what's in the book. All right. And I've had videos in the past to say that. But thank you for coming by. Thank you for this topic, Tim. And of course, Bub and DS, you two are aces, the best in the business. And I'm very blessed to be with you too. Everybody be blessed and be back next week.
Thank you, Roger. This is Bub's Comics saying catch us next week on No Faces Comic Chat, and catch DS on Golden Guys this week, tomorrow, I believe, and catch Roger on Between the Sheets. No, Between the Covers. No, crap. What is it, Roger?
Creator's Notes.
Creator's Notes. Creator's Notes. Creator's Notes Between the Sheets on Thursday night on Comic Head 84's channel. And this is Bub's Comics signing off, saying everybody read a comic. Thanks. Bye.